E este vai ser, de facto, uma sessão especial, já quando a presença de duas personalidades de prestígio internacional, o Dr. José Magalhães e o Sr. Tim Berners-Lee. Começamos justamente por Tim Berners-Lee, conhecido como o pai do World Wide Web, que, diretamente de Boston, estará em paz. E eu passo a palavra ao Sr. José Magalhães, que fará a apresentação deste keynote speaker.
Muito obrigado e muito boa tarde. É um grande prazer para mim para moderar este painel com duas personalidades tão importantes e que tiveram tanto impacto até agora e continuam a ter no nosso mundo. Tim Berners-Lee é considerado o inventor da World Wide Web. Sir Tim Berners-Lee é Senior Research Scientist do Massachusetts Institute of Technology, diretor do World Wide Web Consortium, professor na Universidade de Southampton e coordenador da cadeira da 3Com do Laboratório for Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence, do MIT. Diplomado pela Universidade de Oxford, exerce o cargo de diretor adjunto da Web Science Research Initiative, uma estrutura que desenvolve novas concepções e utilizações para a Internet. Vou desde já também apresentar uma pessoa que aqui em Portugal não precisa da apresentação, o Sr. Secretário de Estado, Dr. José Magalhães, que atualmente é Secretário de Estado Adjunto e da Administração Interna, cargo que já dos assuntos parlamentares, foi ex-deputado, desenvolveu atividades de consultor internacional para a definição de estratégias de administração aberta e aprofundamento da democracia na era digital. Licenciado em Direito pela Faculdade de Direito de Lisboa e mestre em Ciências Jurídico-Políticas pela Faculdade de Direito da Universidade de Coimbra. É docente universitário na Faculdade de Direito de Lisboa, analista e comentarista político. Tim, good afternoon, and sorry for our delay here. We were depending on the Prime Minister this morning and started a little bit late, and as a consequence, the lunch also took a little bit longer. I have just presented you and Dr. José Magalhães, and I think I would like to pass the word directly to you. We're very happy to have you with us. After all, it doesn't happen every day that we have the inventor of the World Wide Web with us, albeit via television. Tim.
Well, thank you for inviting me to speak. It's an honor. And I have the job of following lunch, and I hope you had a good one. I understand that I'm going to now talk for about half an hour, and I'll set the framework for then a discussion that we can have after that about all kinds of things. So I'll talk a little bit about the web as it's evolving in the near future, and a bit, and a small amount about the web as it's evolving, as we should look at it, evolving into the 10, 20 years out. The original point of the web, the thing which made it work, 1989, was that it was designed to be universal. It was designed to be a universal space. So what that meant was that in order to work, in order for everybody to put things in it, it had to run on any hardware. It had to run no matter what software. It had to work on for all kinds of different information. It wasn't designed to work for a particular sort of document. Clearly, it had to continue to be usable in all kinds of different languages, different cultures, and also it's very important it should be accessible with by people with disabilities. So it's got the universality is a very important aspect of it. And I'm going to mention one of these areas, which is one of the many areas which is actually very topical right now, and that is the device independence. I've always said from the beginning that the web should work on any device. Initially, computers tended to be all the same size, And a website would say, important, before using this website, you must adjust your screen to 800 by 600 pixels. Now, that, of course, was very narrow-minded of the website designers. Now people realize that not only do screens go much larger, they go also much smaller. And we've got this huge variety of different devices which are coming out, people are carrying in their pockets, in their purses, which are being stuck onto the walls, or which are being stuck onto cars, all kinds of places. So we're finding that it's very important that the web should work on all of these devices. In fact, at W3C, the World Wide Web Consortium, there is a mobile web initiative, MWI. Now the mobile web initiative attempts to make sure, firstly, that the standards all do work on different sorts of device, but also it tries to make sure that there are guidelines and understanding of, in fact, how to tackle the difficult challenge of making an information space which will work acceptably on small devices and very powerfully on large devices. So the mobile environment, and making sure that as this mobile environment explodes, we still have one web, is one of the challenges which we have before us. That's a particular one. But I'd like to go a little bit beyond that. I'd just like to use that as a key for thinking more broadly about the progress we're making in technology. So I'll go back to the beginnings of the web. Well, let's go back before the web, in fact, to before the internet. Let's imagine back to the time when computers were, for the first time, connected by telephone lines, and one computer could be made to telephone another one. Then there were programs which would send messages across, but your email address had to be a sequence of the names of computers that you had to be sent through. Obviously, this involved too much knowledge of the telephone lines themselves on the part of anybody using the system. What the internet did was it made all that seem to be a cloud. The internet is often referred to as the internet cloud because from the point of view of a programmer, from the point of view of a user, you're at a computer, there are other computers, and the connections are not anything we have to worry about. What the internet did is it raised the level of discourse from talking about the connections to talking about computers. Well, talking about computers was all very well, and before the web, then you could connect to another computer across the internet, and then you'd have to run a program particular to that computer in order to get at some information. So if you wanted to get at information, you had to be very aware of the other computer and of the programs that ran on it. The realization of the web was taking us another level and saying, actually, it's not the computers which are interesting, it's the documents. The documents are the primary object of our interest, and a good web browser, most of the time, will hide the computers from you. It will allow you to just go from page to page, looking at the information in an abstract world. The abstract world of information, where the connections now are links between documents, they're not links between computers. So that was an important raising of the level of abstraction. It meant that people now interact with computers without having to think about the computers, let alone having to think of all the phone lines which connect those computers. Well, now we have another tension, and we need another step. We've got to the point that people, for example, are putting the same information into different web pages and getting fed up with it. A current example in the blogosphere is that people are going to a social networking site and then telling the social networking site who their friends are. They make a list of friends or acquaintances or colleagues. And then when they go to another social networking site, they have to do it again. And then they go to a photo site, and the photo site wants to know where their friends are. And then they go to a travel site, and the travel site can give them a better view of the world, can show them where all their friends are if it knows who their friends are. So suddenly we've got this piece of information, who are my colleagues, that I've put into a computer so many times because I put it into different websites. What's going on here? Well, the problem is that what's important to me is the relationship I have with another human being, the social net, or the relationship I have, say, with a customer, or with a product that I bought and I have under warranty. Whatever it is, all these web pages are really about things. when we move to the next level, we allow ourselves to think about the things, to think about a person, to just say once, this is a friend of mine, and that information to be available automatically to those people that are authorized to have it, to any applications. Now this moving from the layer of documents to the layer of things is something we call the semantic web, and it's supported by standards from W3C. There is the RDF data standard, and now coming up to be released at the final level as the W3C recommendation in the new year is the query language, which is called Sparkle. So that's SPARQL, but we're going to start the new year with a Sparkle, and that's a very important step in the semantic web. Sparkle is a language which you can use to query things very much at the thing level. Query who are my friends. And it works at the first level independently of where the information came from. At the second level, of course, you have to be able to find out where the information came from when you have to decide whether to trust it. So, we have then these layers that we have been through. We've got there's the internet layer, there is the web layer, which then brings us from computers to documents, and the semantic web layer, which takes us to things. Why is this important? Well, it connects, in fact, to the mobile web. Suppose I'm driving down the highway and I see in my navigation screen up ahead there's a restaurant. I see this because my car is on the internet. We're in the future. In fact, my passenger has a very nice big screen. Pixels are cheap. So the passenger is looking ahead, and on the road ahead, on the navigation road, they see a variety of restaurants. And because we're on the internet, the passenger can click and look at these things, choose a restaurant, and bring up the menu, and ask everybody in the car what they will want to eat when we get there, and call up ahead. Because we've got access to these things has been connected, because the restaurant has not just a website, but it also had a location. It had a latitude and a longitude. And so that, because that information was available as data about it, the navigation system could find it and put it onto the map, and so we could make the transfer from looking at the world in a geographic view to looking at the world in a gastronomic view. And so we could order our information, these things ahead. Well, take another case. Supposing I'm traveling, I'm walking down the street. I realize I really have to change my flight back, or I realize I need to work on booking a flight for my vacation. So I bring out my phone and I put in the basic coordinates of when I'll be going, where I'll be going, and the phone gives me a list of from the travel agent website of basic flights. So I pick myself a flight. Now, at this point, the travel agent's website is not what's important to me. The travel agent, as a person, as an agent I deal with, is important. The flight is important to me. So when I bookmark that flight, what's important is I'm bookmarking the flight rather than a particular website, than a particular web page. So later on, I've managed to book the flight. I'm happy. I've got the flight fixed. I'm not so happy about my accommodation. So later on, I get into my home or my office. There on the wall is a big screen. The phone authenticates to the screen, knows that it can it can trust the screen. So now the phone can work with the screen, and the screen now can do a much better job of showing me my flight. It can show me a picture of the airplane. It can show me a map. Around the map, it can show me pictures of hotels I might want to stay in, and things that I might want to do when I'm there. It can use the fact that I've got megapixels of information now. The actual task of booking my vacation is something which has had a continuity between my phone, looking at it on my phone, and looking at the very large screen. So what we have to do is we have to get our programming, we have to get our way of looking at the world, way of interfacing it, to move up from being focused on a particular web page, which I bookmark, to being focused on a particular task. So your eyes will stand for tasks, for flights, for vacations, for trips, for events, for people, for products, for customers. So that is part of the key, in fact. This moving up a level is part of the key in the future, I'm convinced, to doing the best job with all these different devices, making ourselves maximally efficient when you were using all these devices. So, how can we immediately start moving in this direction? Well, getting data into this, out there onto the web is important. There are some projects which have started recently called linked open data. Linked data is information which is out there on the web, and it's got URIs which link it so that when you pull in data about a particular thing, for example, a city, it will then give you URIs to other things, such as the country that the city is in, or pages with more information about that city, so that you can, from the data point of view, you can pull in data about those things and compare that city with other cities and so on. We can go from a city to the airport, and from the airport to flights from the airport and so on. There is now a thing called DBpedia, which is like Wikipedia, but it's a database. It's a database of the information which people have put into Wikipedia, which is of a data form. So for the cities, it has populations, and it has latitudes and longitudes, temperatures, and so on. DBpedia is a very useful resource because it gives a URI to all kinds of well-known things, and that's being used to connect databases. The GeoNames database of places. It's being used to connect the Music Brains database of musical performers and tracks that they have recorded, and albums that those tracks can be found on, and so on. It can all be connected to the person in the DBpedia. So we're starting to get this linked framework of data, and as that progresses, it becomes more and more easy to get a return on putting your own data on, because you can link into that data. So under the heading of Portugal 2.0, one of the things I suggest is that Portugal sets itself a target to have the data about Portugal, the public data, which makes Portugal hum, data about cities and towns, data from the list of problems in the pavement that the towns need to fix, lists of events, lists of people who are at events, connections between towns, events, and people, times, places throughout Portugal should be put onto the web in this raw form. Because what we found we've had a few workshops about the semantic web and e-government, and the web and e-government in the future in general, and we found that what happens when a government gives data onto the web in a raw form, putting it in there using the data standards, then other websites will come and reuse it. So they will come and, for example, merge the data from Portugal with the data from other countries all across Europe. Or some websites may give a particular view for travel, or another one may give a particular view for business. Another one may think of a particular way of combining this data which hasn't been thought of before. So we're seeing in various countries websites pop up which give you data about how your government is doing, who's voting in what way. There's a govtrack.us in the US. In the UK, there is theyworkforyou.org.uk. There's a site which says, look, they work for you. This is what they've been doing. Check on what they've been doing. These are where the people that you elected, what they've been, they and your local government have been doing. So there's a lot of energy to reuse data, and in fact, it will to a certain extent save a lot of energy when a government department doesn't feel it has to provide the ultimate user interface to the data, because other people will do that. If it just makes the raw data available, other people will do that. So I put that, the Portuguese web of data connecting, of course, to the international web of data, but Portugal is of a size in which you could decide as a community that you're going to do this. And we've seen this happen in a few other communities already, such as life scientists, people dealing with drug discovery, have decided this is too important. The amount of data we have that we have to share is so valuable. The jobs, the task we have of finding cures for new diseases is so important that we're going to share all our data using these technologies. We're going to break down the walls between the silos, between these stovepipes, which our data is currently isolated using the semantic web technology. So that connects together two of the ways in which the web is evolving at the moment: the data web, the web of linked data, and the mobile web. And these are important things now. Those are the things which now, if you have a website, you should be thinking about. I'd like, before we start discussing these things generally, to mention one other thing. I'd like to take us further out into the distance. I'd like to point out that we have been a little incremental, perhaps a little short-sighted. After the dot-com boom and bust, industrial investment tends to be focused on something which will generate a return in 18 months. And that's very reasonably cautious attitude for business. But looking back over the last few years, we've seen the very disruptive change of the internet. We've seen the disruptive change, sort of 15 years later, of the introduction of the World Wide Web. It's changed how the world has worked. It's given us new terms, new ideas. It's made it difficult to explain to people from the eras before these changes. It's difficult to explain to youth now what it was like before that, what it was like before the web, what it was like before the internet. So these disruptive changes have happened, and they've happened because people have been doing research, looking fairly far out and dreaming that things could be different. Now, the web is a big thing. Big, I mean, the number of web pages is similar to the number of neurons in the brain. The brain is a very complex thing. When you look at a network as big as the web, it turns out that you can do, it has very interesting large-scale effects. In fact, it turns out the web has interesting scale-free properties. It's a very interestingly shaped network. But how much do we really know about it? What is it anyway? The web is not a network of computers. It's a network of people. When somebody makes a link, a person makes that link. When somebody follows a link, a person follows that link. It's not a connection between the web pages, really. The web pages are just the intermediates for the people who are communicating. So, if you like, the web is humanity connected by technology. It's interesting as a large system, well, partly because we study the brain partly because we're worried about disease. We study the brain because we feel that we could prevent disasters happening if we'd like to find out how to stop Alzheimer's, for example. When we look at something of a similar size, if not similar complexity, a very different sort of complexity to the World Wide Web, we also, I think, have a duty to look at it from the point of view of something that's very, very large system upon which we are dependent, and which is now something which we should look after, we should nurture. And that nurturing partly involves looking into the future. It means understanding it better as a large system, and understanding whether or not it's going to be stable. Will it be socially stable? Will the blogosphere, in fact, become just an unending rumour mill, and which will unseat all the work that science has done? Will we, in the future, end up producing a sort of space in the web in which democracy, in fact, takes second place, and we end up with some sort of celebrity culture or a very much media-driven culture? So culturally, what will happen on the web? That's only part of it. It's not just analysing what happens. The web is something, unlike the brain, is something that we have created ourselves. So we have an extra responsibility. We have an extra responsibility, in fact, to look at the next thing. Is there another opportunity we've got to make a huge step, introducing new technology which will enable humanity in a way that we can't imagine at the moment? Well, I don't know, but I imagine that it will. I don't imagine that we've stopped. I don't imagine that we've got to the end of the road of research about how technology can enable humanity. Looking back over the centuries, the pace of change has just got faster and faster. I don't think, maybe after the age of steam, people imagined that that was it, and we more or less finished and didn't imagine the age of electricity. Maybe after the age of electricity and the washing machine, people imagined that we'd sort of done it, and everything that had been invented, could have been invented, has been invented, as somebody at one point said. But I don't think at any age it's sensible to do that. Just extrapolating, we can see that there are going to be huge new advances. When we make those advances, they will happen faster if we have large numbers of students all thinking about them, large numbers of people all tackling huge imaginary tasks, imagining building systems for a world where technology is running even faster, computers are running even faster, networks are even running even faster. I talked about the pixels becoming cheaper. Imagine that when you go to, for example, Times Square, in London, New York, I don't know whether there's an equivalent in Lisbon. Times Square is famous for the neon signs. Well, actually, it's famous for the signs. Originally, it was famous for the neon signs. Well, now if you go there, you can play the game, spot the neon sign, because actually the real neon signs are becoming rarer. Most of Times Square now is covered with pixels. It's displays. It's color screens. If you rented all of it at once, you could put up a huge movie display or whatever you wanted. It's completely programmable. Now, in Times Square, the real estate is very valuable. A lot of people are looking at it. But as the cost of screens comes down, you imagine the screens will be coming everywhere. Everywhere we turn, there will be screens. Maybe when you look at a conference hall like this, instead of deciding what color to paint the walls, well, we'll just cover it with pixels and decide what color the walls should be later, have it different for every conference. We may even have to think about zoning rules to prevent people putting pixels too many places. Can you imagine every taxi completely covered with advertising, driving the town not being covered with black taxis or yellow taxis, but just being covered with pixels? It could become quite overpowering. So we're going to be in a very different state. There will be this imaginary, this abstract world of things, and we will have very powerful ways of interfacing to it. And so we need to now thinking, when we think ahead to that state, what software will we need to best make the most of that? How will we manage when we have got all the information in Portugal, all the information from the information and communication sciences available, all the enterprise information that I have access to available, all the international information available, then I'm sitting with this huge resource. How do I make something that will allow me to investigate it, research into it, live my life very fully in it, but without being completely overwhelmed? So, in order to address this, a few of us at MIT and at Southampton have coined the phrase web science. We note that a few years ago there was no computer science. Computer science was done in mathematics departments and engineering departments, and by anybody who was interested in it. So now we have people doing what we call web science, and they are in network science departments. They're in computer science departments, although a lot of computer science looks at what happens within one computer, not what happens when you connect billions of computers. We have people doing web science who are psychiatrists, psychologists, because they are looking at how an individual person behaves. And they're looking at, therefore, exactly whether somebody will be able to use information presented in a certain way. They're looking at the psychology of why somebody will contribute to Wikipedia, why they will contribute to a blog, what drives them, what are the kudos factors. which drives somebody to contribute. There are people doing web science as mathematicians, as computer scientists, as engineers, because web science, unlike brain science at the moment, it's not just analysis. There's a circle. Often I draw a circle in which we do an analysis of what happens and we end up with some problems, and then there is a creative cycle in which we have an idea, we implement it using engineering. The web is something we've built. So we'll be building new webs. And web science is about constructing better systems on the internet. And then when we've constructed those systems, they take off, but they have all kinds of unforeseen effects because we have this huge system. And when they have these unforeseen events, then when the microscopic systems we define give rise to these macroscopic, these large-scale effects, then again we analyze them. We do the science, and that leads to our wish list for more things, and so on to the engineering of the science. Where the very interesting piece at the top is the creativity, which sparks the new piece of the cycle. So that is web science. Southampton and MIT have taken the lead, as you mentioned, in starting this web science research initiative, but we're very anxious to join in, of course, across the planet with everybody who thinks that this is important, to define it, and to hopefully, in the end, to put lots of students in the positions where they can produce new creative ideas, which will save us from the disasters of the system breaking, but also, more importantly, I think, more positively in the future, we'll create new systems which will make the web seem very simple and weak in comparison, and will be devastatingly important tools for solving the huge problems of this age, such as looking for cures for cancer and AIDS and world poverty and so on. So, with those thoughts, I'll wrap up and pass it over to you.
Thanks a lot, Tim, and I think I would like to pass the word directly to José Magalhães to shoot off some questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Reiter. Hello, Sir Timothy Berners-Lee. It's a great pleasure and an honor to be here. And you might be thinking, who's the guy? I'm a legal scholar, a constitutional legal scholar, constitutional law scholar that stepped into your works back in 1993, believe it or not, and that completely changed my life. Because for some strange reason, I decided to try to understand your workings, and by doing so, I became some kind of missionary trying to explain to other people that this can be a subject for all. And today I'm here just as a speaker for a very distinguished audience of decision makers, the best people from our communications community who came here to this Congress and were so kind to invite me to be their speaker. So what I'm basically going to do is to offer a brief comment and ask you a few questions which I think express the curiosity we feel when we listen to you. So this is going to be really short. My comment is very obvious. What a beautiful creature you made, sir. It's now mature and we can feel the difference. I remember how it was back in the 90s when my little modem was 200 kbps. So really slow, or even less. And I was so happy having access to files coming from several countries in the world, etc., etc. So everything changed so much because, as you stressed, we can have it anywhere. We can have broadband. We can have sophisticated applications. And we can see loads and loads of content of all kinds. Now, this brings me to the first issue and the first question. I remember very clearly that last March, you told the U.S. Congress that the secret of the success of the web was the fact that it's based upon a kind of architecture which is special, because it's basically universal and it is amazingly flexible. So you said, let it be like that. And my question is, were you heard? Do you feel you were sufficiently heard? Do you think it's going to be like that forever?
I never know, and I never have known whether it will be like that forever. And I don't predict the future. I restrict myself to saying what I want to happen, and working to try to make it to make it so. I think the openness of the web, for example, the fact that that if you pay for a connection to the internet, and the fact that I pay for a connection to the internet, then we can communicate. It's been just fundamentally important. The fact that it connects everybody. It's just a data bus, and you can plug into it at any point, and you can connect to anybody. That's been very important. There have been some threats recently. A cable company was accused of trying to slow down the packets which carried video, videos which were being distributed from websites. The question was, were they trying to do this because those websites competed with its own business model of selling movies to consumers in their homes? That's always been a question. I think the cable companies have had for years the business model that they control completely the set of movies which tonight you have the option of watching. And that's been a luxury which I think they're learning to lose. Learning that there's a huge market out there. We're moving towards a place where every movie which has been ever made publicly available will be available for rent, to be able to pay money and go and look it up, even if it's very old, very obscure, in a language which isn't the local language, which in the country that I'm plugged in. But I'm an expatriate, for example, or if I have a particular interest in a particular style of artistic film. So I think what's going to happen, I hope that's what's happened, and what we must work towards, is that as we go through this final step, I mean, you said that it was mature, but it's really, we haven't got to the point that everybody has got high definition, capable broadband in their homes. So we haven't got the complete film market available on the over the internet, but we're moving there very quickly. And I think one of the things I pointed out to Congress is that it's been very important that the standards, the basic web technology, is royalty-free. You don't have to pay royalties to patent holders when you use it. For the moment, there is an issue with encoding technologies for video that there is you do have to pay royalties for most of these encoding technologies. So that's going to be an interesting question as we go forward. Also, as we go forward, there is I hope we will see the convergence onto common standards for video encoding. So the video world will become part of the web, very much in the same style, and there will be a very, very large market. Because the amount of business which is to be done in these new markets is so large that it will make, I think, it'll be much larger than the amount of money that people will be able to get by just trying to constrain either connection to the internet or by constraining the use of video technologies by charging too much for licenses to use the technology. So I'm interested to hear that you say that it's mature. But I suspect that even though it seems mature to us, that we've been watching it since the early days, I suspect that we still, as they say, we ain't seen nothing yet. That what's to come will be even more surprising.
I sincerely hope you're right. Because what we have already is quite promising. And I'm entirely sure we're going to have more. And this leads me to a second question. It is about this we. We are going to have more. We are now aware that to be or not to be on the web is now the question. But many people are out of the web. But that's probably a more important, from a philosophical and cultural point of view, problem, which is how you use, perceive, and so can extract a concrete advantage from the web. That does not depend on the web. It depends on you, your culture, your skills, your interests, your perversions eventually, etc., etc. So that's why I made a little exercise this morning. I made a query in one of those famous search engines for Timothy Berners-Lee. And I got 1,590,000 hits, which was great. But then I made a query for Paris Hilton. And then, sir, I got 20 million hits. And this very clearly shows that ordinary citizens use the net entirely freely. And that's what it was made for. But now this brings a problem on how we should educate people and train people and spread digital literacy to have people use the web for those purposes that you mentioned. Not by chance, the motto of this Congress is Portugal 2.0. And by doing so, the organizers wanted to stress that we must grow and change. We must move forward. Now, the issue is, how can we move forward in a democratic environment, of course, and how can we stimulate people to query perhaps more for Berners-Lee than, God bless Hilton, for Paris Hilton? That's a philosophical, but also a political and practical challenge.
I think, well, I, of course, wouldn't at all constrain what people search for, but I think you put your finger on two really interesting questions there going forward. I think it really, if I can, this is all under the umbrella of how can we collectively operate? How can we collectively be smarter than we are individually? Things like the democratic system was invented in order to make people be able to operate collectively, hopefully more reliably than a single person would be able to. Things like the academic system of scholarly review, the review of journals and scholarly papers, that was put together to try to make the scientific community smart and careful as a body. A lot of the problems in the world, the decisions about when to go to war, how to allocate resources to different scientific projects and so on, these are communal decisions which have to be made. And I feel also that it's important that the members of the public should be able to find those things which are scientifically verifiable. Whereas it's fun to fill the world with poetry, it's fun to fill the world with comedy, and of course music and art are absolutely essential to our souls. I feel that when it comes to running the country and making decisions, for example, about global warming, we need to be able to use the web to enhance the scientific process, to enhance the process so that not just the scientific community, but everybody is involved and can see which are the reliable resources, where anybody can challenge. But when people challenge, they're held to a degree of an accountability. I would love there to be the systems on the web which hold politicians to a certain degree of accountability. So when they say things in the heat of the moment on stage, then their campaign staff can later go and then produce the justification. And then the other campaign can then perhaps use systems of argumentation to segment the argument and see which pieces of it stand out to inquiry and serious debate and which pieces don't. How can we hold ourselves to a high standard of scientific method? How can we hold ourselves to a high standard of respectful debate? I think that we can build these systems in the web. One of the things which gives me hope is the number of things which are being experimentally done now. If you look at Wikipedia, for example, the Wikipedia started as a site where anybody could edit. And it had the social rules written over the door to say, be careful, we trust you, this is your responsibility, and please make an encyclopedia. Right? And it started with those rules, and for a long time, and many thousands of articles, it worked. But then it hit the problem of an article or two which were very contentious, in which religious beliefs, or the conflict between religion and science, or the conflict between different political philosophies met. And then people would edit the page backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards. So the Wikipedia process failed. So the good people in the Wikipedia community decided to create a new process. And they're now trying to make mixtures of democracy, meritocracy, systems which try to maybe elect people or choose people who have become trusted, systems of review, systems of maybe election, who knows. Different websites across the planet are starting to work on different systems of self-governance, of mutual review. They're trying to build quality systems. Some of them are doing better than others. For example, I won't go into examples, but some of them do quite well and some of them don't. One of the interesting things, though, is that humanity is experimenting with ways of building a source of trusted information. I think this is really important. This is critical for the next decade, is that humanity manages to create reliable institutions on the net, but it always has a process of challenging those institutions. And the balance between those things, what in the US Constitution people refer to as the checks and balances, making sure that a given body has got power, but on the other hand, there's always a challenging way to challenge it. I think that's going to be, I think it's really important.
Very, very well, but that leads us to another issue which should be considered, I think. We can be optimistic. I sincerely believe we should. We have new tools. We have even powerful tools to express our thoughts, to do political options in much better conditions. But there are also risks. Some people talk of a dark side of the web, which is a metaphor. But I'm concerned, not only personally, but as a public officer and a member of a political institution, on the new threats to values we cherish in this part of the world where we live. I mean, concretely, privacy. There's no way we can protect privacy using the traditional tools, because you caused a digital tsunami, and the tsunami is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger as those social collaborative networks get stronger and wider and act at the worldwide level. And either we invent and come up with new tools, what we call in Europe privacy-enhancing technologies, or citizens won't be able to defend themselves from systematic invasions in privacy. I'm not just thinking of the kind of invasion that people talk about when they talk about 1984, electronic invasion of privacy, etc. I'm talking about invasions that can be very easily organized by individuals, by private organizations of all kinds. So when you talk about semantic web, which is a fascinating concept, and access to raw information, I also consider that we have to be careful and invent new tools to protect certain kinds of information to begin with, and then to assure, to guarantee a high level of protection and train our citizens to protect their own information in this new digital tsunami. But then how? So the question was easy. Now the reply.
Privacy is a really interesting space, and I think that my best guess at how to do this at the moment is that we shift our focus about how we protect privacy. The old-fashioned computing system approach to security was to make a secure system, have password access to it, and have a systems of rights which allowed some people to get access to to certain data, but in general not to allow anybody access to other data. So we've built a lot of systems which work in that sort of way. And while this technology is important, there is always there are two possibilities. One, which make it fail. One is that data gets out accidentally in some way. Once it's out, then it's out. It's been mismanaged, or it's been stolen, or it's been photographed over somebody's shoulder, but it gets out. But there are a lot of scenarios in which information must get out. When you go into a hospital, if you are you're bleeding, then the doctor wants to know what blood type you are, then the doctor will go into your maybe go into your wallet, go into your purse, pull out whatever, try to find something with the blood type. Try and find something which will allow them to find out whether you're allergic to things, for example. In a way, in an emergency, that's reasonable. But then, when the emergency is over, you're recovering, then that information must be respected, and the doctor should not use that information for anything. Not for registering you in the hotel, then you should be asked to divulge the information. In the US at the moment, the government has access to wiretap information for the use of anti-terrorism. So they're trying to break down the silos, just as you can do with semantic web technology, clearly. You can break down those silos. You can very powerfully move information from one place to the other. Sometimes you have to do that in order to fight against terrorism. But when you do that, then that information should be tagged with the fact that it has been acquired only for anti-terrorism use. So I think that what we have to implement are accountable systems. Accountable systems are systems which keep track of what's happened. So that if you're a government agent and you're using this information, and you use it, in fact, just to arrest somebody because they haven't returned their library book, then the person can come back and say, wait a moment, what makes you think I owe a library book? And they'll come back and they'll look. The computer system will be able to tell them, well, you've used various pieces of information in your search, and including wiretap information was used in order to identify this person as being that particular individual. So then the system will have caught an abuse of this. So when many people in authority will have the right to use information under some circumstances, even in enterprise too, people have the right. Perhaps people in the HR department, human resources personnel, they will be able to look at details of somebody's record. But they won't be able to use that for making a Christmas card list. They mustn't pass that on to people in different departments. So, it may be more constructive now to us to instead of trying to lock the information in a box, to do that to a certain extent, but to also to write out the conventions as to what's acceptable, as to say. Even if you can pay on the black market $85 to find out information about somebody, to find their health history, for example, you're not allowed to use that when you decide whether to employ them. You're not allowed to use that to send messages to their friends. So it's just, you just can't reuse the information even if you can get it. So at MIT we've been looking at building these accountable systems. I think there's a lot more research which is going to be done, and I think a lot of the very important aspect of, as I mentioned, of web science is that it's not just a technical system, it's a technical design. Every design has technical protocols and social protocols. There will be at least as much work done on the social protocols as on the technical protocols in the decades to come.
Very interesting, sir. One of the things that rise high curiosity, certainly in this audience also, is that precisely as you stressed, you have social protocols that can be used in a very diverse way. And we all agree diversity should be promoted. But now, in a few days, ministers will have to gather in Brussels to discuss how to prevent the use of the web to spread information, for instance, on how to make a bomb, on how to use it for terrorism or other criminal purposes. And so a line has to be drawn somewhere between acceptable use of the web and uses we should fight against. Now, do you think police forces are prepared to fight that fight the right way? How do you see the world after 9/11 from this point of view? The web survived, of course, and it became an important tool to defend democracy, but it is also open to all kinds of other activities, including the ones that not only want to fight, but including destroy democracy. And it's not just the web now. We are talking about Web 2.0, 3.0, whatever it means. I don't know what you mean by Web 3.0, if you do. I've seen you react very negatively when someone raises the expression Web 2.0. So I wonder how you react when I say Web 3.0, 4.0. Who knows? But anyway, we know that the web, as it's going to be, will be open to all kinds of uses, including criminal uses. Now, how do we build capabilities to preserve freedom on the one hand, and at the same time create appropriate tools to prevent those negative uses of the web? I'm entirely sure this is one of the main challenges. It's being discussed under the umbrella of G8, European Union, global transatlantic dialogue, everywhere, because it's a crucial issue. What would your point of view be on this issue?
Okay, well, first of all, that's another good question. You have some good questions here. First of all, when we're talking about cultural diversity, one of the things we haven't mentioned to date is that, of course, there are the people who are not connected to the web. Even though it seems to be the tsunami, there are people who are on dry land. They're not connected to the sea of information, and so while you talk about Portugal 2.0, also you should remember that outside Portugal there are many people who've not got the benefit of the connectivity that you have in Portugal, and so we should always be aware of that and always make sure that both when we develop the technology and also explicitly by helping developing countries, we should try to reduce that gap as much as possible. The gap, of course, can exist not only between countries, but also within a country. There can be a large amount of, even when the elite are connected to the internet, then there may be a very large poor sector which don't have the benefit of it. So that is one thing on our agenda, and I think clearly spending money, education, now reaching out to developing countries is an important part of that. So then we can talk about humanity more. When we talk about humanity connected by technology with the web, we do actually mean a larger proportion of humanity. So what happens then when we have all this humanity? What is to become of us? Two of the fears that people have brought to me since the beginning of the web are opposites, if you like. One of the fears was that the French, I remember, expressed when there was talk about opening a new transatlantic fiber optic cable which would connect the front much more effectively to the United States. There was a concern that American lowest common denominator McDonald's culture would flow down the pipe and would obliterate French culture. Now, I don't know why the French imagined that the vapor pressure of the Louvre and the European culture coming up the other way wouldn't be stronger and push back into the States. But there was that clear concern, and I remember when I gave a talk about it at one point, I came back to my hotel room in the US and I found a copy of USA Today, and there on the front page was a story about the French farmer who would put a chain around a newly constructed McDonald's with his tractor, towed it away, because he wanted to preserve the French way of life, in particular the French restaurants which ate his beef. So there is a fear that the web will bring us down to the lowest common denominator, that we will have, in fact, no diversity. It will become dominated by a single website, to a certain extent, as software is largely dominated by a single operating system supplier, and that website will have control over what we think, how we vote, and where we buy our beef. At the other end of the scale, there is a concern close to what you expressed about people getting together in small antisocial cults, the Heaven's Gate cult. We remember as a group of people who were so philosophically removed from each other, they were convinced that a spaceship was waiting to take them to heaven behind a comet, and they committed suicide. They were they were in a cultural pothole, a deep pit, with very steep sides. People imagined in the early days of the internet, when a lot of people had computers, would be in the cellar, in a separate room, before they were all on Wi-Fi and laptops in the kitchen. People would go to the cellar and browse the web and read websites which all linked to each other in a circle, and filter their email so that they only got email from people with the same strange beliefs. And there was a fear that the only common language they would have with other people they met in the street was to shoot them. So there is the cult, and there is the lowest common denominator. These are extremes of communities, the very small, narrow community, and the overly wide, broad, and shallow community. Well, I think when you look around and you look at humanity, you find, in fact, that we have many different communities of different sizes. We have small ones. We have communities of the size of one. When I sit by myself for a moment in a tree by the beach, and I just think I'm spending important time by myself, just being a community of one. When I'm going to an international conference, maybe you feel this is a national one, but from my point of view, it's an international one. For me, this is work on the world stage. It's in the community of 6 billion people. And so, at different times in my life, I take part in communities of different sizes. In my university, in my family, with groups. And it turns out, when you look at the way people interact, there are groups of all scales. There is no scale which is magic, which is special. The connections between people are the so-called scale-free. There's a scale-free network. There are some big websites, but also there are lots of other websites of different size. And a lot of the small websites have got there is a large amount of attention on them, and it's not completely dominated by the big website. It seems to me that balance between is important. We do need a few large authorities, but they need to be constantly challenged. They need to be challenged all the way down the scale, down to in the family. The family has its own people who challenge it. So the smallest groups need to have individuals that challenge the groups that challenge larger groups. There's a constant invention of new communities. There's new organizations are forming, new NGOs. There's a constant tussle at the government level, within governments, at the international level. In this world, there's this constant tussle between different communities of different sizes, and I think that may be optimal. It may be the best we can do, to have this constant battle between them. How do we make sure that this continues to go on, but in a friendly fashion? How can we make sure that we don't get groups who are so focused, on how do we find groups who are so focused on stop these groups who are focused on being very destructive? How can we make sure that in the end they can be stopped by law enforcement? But how can we also keep track of the law enforcement and make sure that it doesn't get out of control? These have been the problems which we've had in building a democracy since the very early days. As I say, we're inventing new systems. The key lies in having many, many different overlapping communities of different sizes. we can build new web systems which allow us to build this technology, these overlapping communities, which overlap more. We can now have twin towns. I can have twin groups. I could make my group at work actually twin up with a design group in a completely different culture somewhere else in the world. So I think probably we'll spend more time making the world connect in a way which is less geographic, more closely connected, so that it becomes more of a small world, so that it becomes fewer clicks between the policeman and the terrorist, so that they understand each other. So I think what, in fact, makes this happen, one of the reasons I'm optimistic, and I can't prove this, but I think one of the reasons that we have this jumble of different communities all interacting is that we as individual human beings need to be in that environment. We need to have some time by ourselves. We need some time thinking about at the big end of the scale, thinking about global issues. We need to be members of a group, members of an organization at different scales. And we need to spend certain amounts of time thinking at different scales. And because we, as an individual, operate in these different organizations, communities, by doing that we introduce consistency. You've heard about think globally, act locally. Well, also, when you act globally, think locally. When you act globally, think about what the impact this will have on the local groups you know, on the medium-sized groups you know. I think by people being involved at different scales, we pull together the world. Hopefully, we prevent the people overlap. Hopefully, we prevent the terrorists from doing a huge amount of damage. But also we prevent ourselves from government becoming uncontrollable. So that is my hope, at least.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary of State. I think this has been an extremely interesting session where we covered a very, very broad range of topics. What I recall from this is, number one, the underlying requirement for universality in everything we do when we think in particular about the Internet and the World Wide Web. We have been looking at the structure starting with a network of computers to a network of documents to now a network of those things that are really interesting to us. We have understood that probably there is a couple of rather interesting initiatives that could be launched locally in order to take full advantage of the 2.0 paradigm. One of the things that I thought was actually quite interesting was the challenge that we all have, and I think we have been living with that challenge for a long time, to actually make things intuitive. Young people, children, learn things without reading manuals. They learn things because they can learn them when they are intuitive. And finally, I think that last part of the discussion that really started with the topic around how can we extract value from all the information that we have on the web. How can we, as Tim put it, collectively be smarter than each one individually? That is probably a challenge that goes hand in hand at the end of the day with the final part of the questions around how can we protect ourselves from disloyal use of the Internet, how can we protect ourselves from this unsocial use of the Internet, how can we protect our privacy, and finally I think your statement at the end, how can we still arrange time for us to think about some of the global questions. That was a really interesting session. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Tim, for your time. Thank you, Mr. Secretary of State. Thank you to all the audience.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much. And bye-bye to Boston.
Acabamos de assistir a um momento particularmente interessante de diálogo entre duas grandes personalidades da sociedade da informação, que, graças à tecnologia, estiveram tão próximos. Agora uma pausa para café no Business Lounge. Convido-vos a visitar as empresas presentes neste certame e ver mais de perto o que elas têm para vos oferecer. Voltamos aqui às 16h30. Até já, muito obrigado.